Good evening. Are we ready? Can we start? Welcome, ladies and gents, to this much-awaited conversation with Carlo and Luca about the future city mobility. These are two exceptional guests that I have the honor to introduce to you. Let's start with Luca De Meo, an animal of the automotive industry, 25 years following his passion. First of all in Renault, then at Toyota, then in the Fiat Group, then at Alfa Romeo, and then at Volkswagen Group, and then at Audi, and now as a president worldwide of SEAT, which is, by the way, I've just discovered, the company #1 in Catalonia. He has also written a book called From 0 to 500, where he shares his tips as a top executive, a book which has been pretty successful. And also, there is a Harvard case about him and how he was able to transform the image of the Volkswagen brand in a truly multinational brand. And then Carlo Ratti. The first time that I saw Carlo, it was on the stage of TED, you know, the Californian conference. And he was there, giving a TED talk. And he was launching a small drone with a small light. And he said, look, this is a flying pixel. And the drone started to fly. At a certain point, it didn't fly anymore, and almost fall on the head of Bill Gates, which was sit on the first row. But it didn't hurt him. And this is probably the reason why we have Carlo here tonight with us. Carlo, architect, engineering, urbanist, teacher, researcher, working in Boston, in Turin, in Singapore, in the 3 places at the same time. I don't know how. And he runs a special laboratory in the MIT, Massachusetts Institute for Technology. And it's called SENSEable City. And he's thinking about the future of a city when this technology blanket is covering everything. Before to start with the first question, I would like to tell you that we stop at 7 o'clock, and in the last 10 minutes, we take questions from you. We really love to hear the sound of the human voice, and you have some microphones there that you can use to ask your question. But if you feel a little bit shy, you have a section of your app, of this event application, called Ask and Call, Ask and Voice, Ask in Comments, and you can go into that and ask your questions digitally. So, if you're ready, let's jump to the year 2050. 9 billion people will be living in this planet. Many of them, most of them, in cities. The urban traffic, which is now 65% of the total planet of the total traffic in this planet, according to some sources, will multiply by 3. And a challenge in energy, a challenging resources, a challenging in human life, environment, sustainability. It's really a tough one for humanity. Carlo, Luca, how do you see this picture?
Should we start? Well, first of all, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for reminding me of what happened at TED that day. So I want to say something, and that thing was unpredictable. In the same way that I think the future is unpredictable. And if you look at how we predicted the future in the past, most of the time we screwed up. The Boston Globe, the newspaper of the city where I spent most of my time, in 1900, made a full spread about how Boston would have been in the year 2000. And if you look at that, they missed everything. They were thinking about stuff that never materialized. They were thinking about moving walkways, about a lot of blimps into the sky and so on. And they missed the important things of the past century, such as the internet and all the other things that change our lives. So the first thing I want to say is that, I think the future is not something that will happen and we can predict, but the future is what we do. There's a beautiful citation by Le Petit Prince, the Little Prince by Saint-Exupéry, which is about l'avenir, il faut pas le prévoir, il faut le permettre. We need to let it happen. The future is what we will build every day by the choices we do. And I think when you think about this, then so I wouldn't talk about how mobility will be like in 2030 or 2050, but I think the important thing is what are the choices we have today? And I think today very, very important choice. Today, we have self-driving mobility. That's a reality. We're working with the government of Singapore to do the first fleet of self-driving car deployed in Singapore later this year. We're working with Uber. As you know, Uber, since a couple of months, has a fleet of self-driving cars in Pittsburgh. Actually, you can jump on an Uber. There's still a driver just, to look at what's going on, but actually totally self-driving vehicles. So the technology is there. And this technology could lead us either to hell or to heaven. It could be heaven, because if you go self-driving cars, we can actually share mobility much more. Today, a car is used 5% of the time. 95% of the time, it's just, not only it's not used, but it's actually using valuable public space in our cities. It's parked somewhere. And so if we can change that, because the self-driving car can give you a lift in the morning when you go to your office, and then instead of being parked, can give a lift to somebody else. And so if we change that, we can have a city which is much more efficient. Based on some of the research we've done, you could actually run Barcelona or New York or Milan or Madrid, a big city or a small city, with around, theoretically, around 20% of the cars you have today, if you're ready to share. Now, at the same time, you also have another scenario, which could be total hell, and the scenario is the following. You go self-driving cars. Now, today, if you take an Uber in the United States, the cost of an Uber is something, an Uber or something like a Lyft. It doesn't matter, it's Uber, but something like that. The cost is around $2 per mile. Most of the estimates show that actually, if you go to self-driving cars, the cost will be anything between 20 and 50 cents per mile. Now, if that happens, then it's going to be much, much cheaper to take a car, a shared car, than to take the subway. And if people stop using public transportation, mass transportation, say in London, in a big city, stop using the metro, and everybody wants to take a car, then we got just a gridlock everywhere in our cities. So I think that's an example of how technology, new technology is about to disrupt our cities. This technology most likely is going to shape the city of the 21st century in the same way as the automobile shaped the city of the 20th century. But it's up to us to decide if you want to go to heaven or to hell, one way or another way.
Luca?
I was just thinking that you have three Italians on the stage, and with the mess we have in our cities, we actually don't look very credible speaking about city and mobility. Yeah, but maybe we feel the problem more than others. I thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here. I mean, for me, the point is, there is just to go back to what you said about the unpredictability of the future. They always mention the ex-CEO of IBM telling that the PC would never have more than 1 million, customers or potential. There was Gottfried Daimler that invented the automobile that many years said that there would not be more than 1 million cars in the market or potential because of lack of drivers. Okay, so then in the meantime, people, learn how to drive, and now we are kind of doubting whether there would be no market or there will be a market for autonomous driving car, because I am the kind of person that always keep open the option for the future. So I think this thing will happen. I think the most interesting I can say tonight is that probably you have different actors coming in, from Google to Apple to Uber or Lyft, all the mobility providers. As a car manufacturer, obviously we are the one also developing the technology, but we come from another angle. An angle that people know pretty well already now. That's why they buy some of our product, which is increase comfort and increase safety. Because an autonomous driving car is actually safer, potentially, if it works. And we still have, the issue of 1.2 million people dying by accidents on the street. And I think that the objective of everybody is to get the number to zero. So when we're talking about autonomous driving car, I think we should embrace this potential. We come from another angle. We come from that angle. And yeah, that's the only difference. And probably, I believe there will be some kind of form of co-opetition or competition between the actors, and we'll see, we'll take more advantage out of it. Yeah, that's, I would say that probably the automotive industry is more, acquainted, accustomed to, sell hardware. So to make a autonomous driving car, you need sensor, radars, computer capability. That we know how to sell. What we don't know very well how to do is probably to integrate into that kind of infrastructure, new infrastructure world and digital world, our product. That's something we have to learn.
But automotive is your passion, it's really your passion. When you think of a world where nobody drives anymore, because there is no need to drive, nobody goes and learns to drive or goes on these things.
Well, maybe you'll have, just the fun. Inside the car, you got a self-driving car, and then inside you have a PlayStation in order to feel like you're in a Ferrari. But somehow
that's pretty silly, no?
Sometimes people will still have that experience. But let's imagine, yes,
exactly.
If you want, the car can drive itself.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
well, I think
do
it will
you
be a
think? Do you
different.
like that?
I think it will be a different. It will be a different kind of experience. In a sense, I think it will be more comfortable, so you will be able to do other things. I think it will be a way to interior will become more and more important for the people because you will be able to use that and focus on other things. Yeah, but I'm going to use another quote if you allow me, as you came up with SenseXuper Superi. There was Mr. Porsche said, great guy, obviously. He said that the last car that will be built will be a sports car.
Yeah,
I
so believe that so much.
I tend to like that kind of scenario, but I think the autonomous driving car will come.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Because you got an autonomous car, then you can do many other things. I'm a designer. We do architecture as well, and think about the car can be like a piece of your house, just on wheels. And then you can do the same thing in your house, especially if we'll be able, most likely, to reduce some of the accelerations you have today. You can still use it as an office, you can use it as a living room, you can use it for sleeping, maybe for making love, many other things. The car becomes something like, something quite exciting.
Do you think your industry is prepared to make the changes that this kind of scenario require?
But there is a lot of investment going on. I mean, 2-3 years ago, when I was at Audi, I was driving on Hockenheim at 190 kilometers an hour on an A7 on the passenger seat. So I can tell you that, I lost some years in the process, but it was interesting. So the technology is there. The problem, there are a lot of ethical questions about how to integrate those products into normal environment. Because that was obviously some kind of laboratory. So it was a racing track, so the environment was controlled. But I can imagine, what kind of computer capability you need to cross the center of Roma at 6 o'clock in the afternoon in rush hour. I think you need. Yeah?
Well, I think, that is interesting, and we will certainly need, actually, the beginning of self-driving cars, you might know, was a competition that was launched over 10 years ago by DARPA in the United States. It did this competition in order to do a car that drove itself. Well, at the time, there were different teams. There was a Stanford team, there was an MIT team. They were among some of the top teams that came out of the competition. And if you look at those cars, today you would laugh, you actually had the car, and basically the whole car was filled with computing power. So, just 10 years ago, just because if you think about the speed of increasing computing power and memory and sensors that become cheaper and cheaper, smaller and smaller, well, at the time, the car was basically a full computer on wheels. And now just today, you see that basically you can run your car just with a few sensors. There's still a debate if you need both cameras and the LiDAR sensor. The LiDAR sensor does a three-dimensional scan of the environment, so most people still think that you need that in order to self-drive in the most effective way. Elon Musk and Tesla think you can do it mostly just with cameras, and that's the way they're going. Theoretically, you could. The human eye is just like 2 cameras, so you can do a lot of 3D building from having a number of cameras on the car. But basically, you have that, and then your computing power is very, very small, and so you just have a little kit. And some of the startups now in Silicon Valley are developing this kind of little kit. You plug it into your car, and basically you can turn the car into a self-driving car. So I think that's it shows you how far we come from 10 years ago until today. And to me, the important thing is not necessarily that about how we can pack all this computing power in a small place. To me, the important thing is that when you got a number of things, a number of Internet of Things, well, we've got an Internet of Things, we know a number of things on the Internet, then it could be easy to hack them. And I think we all saw just a couple of weeks ago what happened with the attack on the Internet was produced by Internet of Things elements on the Internet. And the same is going to happen more and more as this field develops. So we all know what happens when your computer gets a virus and the virus crashes your computer. But if the virus crashes your car with yourself in it, it's a different
Yeah, that's
story.
one of our biggest
big
concerns, no?
Yeah.
Obviously, because of the safety issue. So, I mean, there are already been a couple of kind of big examples of, hackers hacking some cars. And I think this is one of the things that makes us very, very prudent when it comes to integrate in series production such kind of cars. This is one thing. The other one is the whole debate about ethical question that cannot be solved by, only by car manufacturer, but also need to be solved by authorities, right? So, because at a certain point in time, computer will have to make a choice between two different scenarios.
Yeah.
So, and this is one thing.
These two things are really very important, as you say. On the first one, I want to say is not only about cars, because the same thing that's happening with cars, it's happening with our buildings, it's happening with our cities, it's happening with nuclear power plants. So the same problem about, how do we make, if all of them belong to this category that usually is called cyber-physical systems. So physical systems that actually are controlled digitally, and there's a combination between the digital and the physical world. So we've got a cyber-physical system, it can be a nuclear power plant or a car, then there's always the risk that somebody can hack into the digital side and then can blow up the physical one. I think that's something that we'll need to look at more and more carefully in the future. Actually, just to say, smart cities, that's a topic of all of what somehow we're doing here in one way or another, where smart cities are just that the digital and physical coming together. So smart cities are the perfect hacking terrain today. And the other thing you're saying, the ethical one, is also very important because, ethics, you cannot do ethics just with zero and ones. You cannot, ethics is never black and white. If it were black and white, we wouldn't have any court, because it would be so simple to say who's right, who's wrong. Ethics today is also part of the context of the situation. You're driving a car and you make decisions taking into account so many parameters that are in not totally a way that can be translated into an algorithm. And what will the car do in the same situation? That's an important thing, And you might know this kind of trolley problem that everybody has been debating in recent months. What happens, if you got a self-driving car, can kill two people, can kill a baby, can kill an old person, can kill the driver. How should the car behave? Well, those are decisions that you might do as a human, and you might go to court to defend them later. But how do you program the car? It's a different question.
And about ethics, there is another very important implication, which is called data. Cars without a driver are cars based on data. Who owns the data? Who controls the data? Are those data a new commons, a new patrimony of humanity, or is someone owning that information? What do you think?
We remind you that at 7 p.m. the show will close its doors.
Thank you so much.
Recordamos que a las 7 de la tarde el salón cerrará sus puertas. Gracias por su visita.
Did we say
So
something
somebody
wrong?
hacked into the system. And
Abs-
Que a las 7 de la tarda el saló tancarà les seves portes. Gràcies per la seva visita.
Thank you so much. You can continue.
No, I mean, maybe I say one thing before Carlo this time. I think the issue of data, I think there will be also different understanding of, let's say, what is trust towards a brand in the future, no?
Yeah.
And trust today, at least in industrial products, about the quality, the reliability of that you are delivering, maybe the quality of our service, etc., etc. I think it will a lot have to do in the future with the idea that the brand is kind of protecting your ecosphere as a human being. And so it's clear that our position, at least, is that no way we will, kind of utilize data of, private data of consumers. I think that's at least our conviction, because it will be a very sensitive topic, yeah? And car are able obviously to communicate a lot of data, and I know that Carlo has a lot of experience with this, but it's clear that we need to protect the private sphere of our customers, which is not probably what people coming from the outside and doing business with data will actually want to do. So that's also a kind of different, let's say, perspective on things. But on the other hand, data is an opportunity to do a lot of things, to improve the experience, to improve the integration of a product in a urban environment or extra-urban environment, to increase the performance that we are able to deliver to the customer.
But I think, Luca, you're presenting like a very wonderful world where brands are defending people's data. I don't think this is the world we live in, unfortunately. This is the world in which, everybody in this room has a smartphone, and I see many of them taking video and so on. Well, each of you with a smartphone, you can use an Apple operating system, you can use an Android operating system. Well, you might know that since you woke up this morning, your position has been captured thousands of times. And not only your position, but what you were doing there. If you were moving in a car, if you were moving by bike, by foot, all this information is actually collected and goes somewhere on it goes to the people running your operating system. It goes to some of the cell phone companies, and so this is a situation
I was talking about car manufacturing. I can tell you, for the records, that we're probably an industry of 125 years. And still we are surviving without basically having data about our customers, because the whole process of selling cars and keeping the contact with the customer is given to the dealer network. So in fact, this is also one of our limitations.
No, but Luca, I understand. You're saying you're the good guys. I trust you. I think you look like a good guy. But I think the thing is, today the world we live in actually has this condition where basically we are digitizing our physical world, and a massive amount of data is being collected by certain companies, certain governments. And that's sort of non-symmetrical. Not everybody has access to the same data. Some companies and governments have much more access than others, and I think we should face it. I understand the way you're playing it. I think it's very good as a position for your brand and in your group. But I think we need to face this reality.
But don't you think that the sensibility of consumer will, to protect will increase? I think so. I think it will be.
Well, I can see a room full of people, and I think, thousands of smartphones. Everybody's happy to share thousands of data points about what they're doing, where they are exactly, and so on, with somebody who they don't even know who they are. There's somebody most likely in California who is collecting, storing all this data. I think, so I don't see a big revolution. I wish. Unfortunately, the revolution we seen last week was not going in the direction I was hoping in the United States. So what I mean is that I think there is certainly discontent in the world, but I don't see that as I don't see too much. I wish there were more discussion about this, because I think the society we're building tomorrow will depend a lot on the choices we make today about this data. And I understand you can play like that. And I think I respect it. I think it's a great position to take. But still, the ecosystem is actually moving very fast into a condition where a lot of this data is stored and in a very asymmetrical way.
One question for the architect. How should we build our cities, our building, our streets, to make the mobility better in town in the future?
Look, I don't think, first of all, I always get these questions, how's the city of tomorrow going to look like? I'm really sorry to disappoint you guys, but the city of tomorrow will look pretty much like the city of yesterday. The proof is also that, we're living today still in cities that were built like 2,000 years ago by the Romans or in the Middle Ages. So I think, as humans, we will always need horizontal floors for living. We will need facades to protect us from the outside. We need windows to look outside. So all those elements will still be there. What will change? I think two things will change. One thing is that the way we behave in the city will change a lot. So the way we get a car in real time, we move from A to B, we meet people, we mate, all these type of things will change a lot. From a physical point of view, if you think about self-driving cars, one thing might change. So if we share more mobility, the total number of miles traveled might not change that much. You've got two phenomena. One is ride sharing, one is car sharing. Ride sharing means you share the same car, and there you reduce a little bit the total number of miles traveled. But the other one is car sharing. You take a car, and then somebody else will take it, And there you increase it a little bit because you need to go from A to B and then from C to D, and you got a little additional segment to connect 2 trips. So let's imagine, it will depend how they play out, but let's imagine total number of miles traveled will not change that much, so the total number of lanes for traffic will be similar. But the interesting thing is that if this happens, then, and if we share more, we can reduce a lot of parking. And parking could be huge. Parking, as I was saying, 95% of the time, our cars are parked. And if we change that number, if it's not 5% usage and 95% park, but it just go to 50-50, then we can reduce immensely the number of parking spaces in our cities. And in the United States, across the country, the number of parking lots is the same surface of Puerto Rico, so it's a huge amount of land. And if we reclaim that in our cities, we can do beautiful things by giving back this infrastructure to other activities, say to biking, to green spaces, to citizens, and it could be a big change in our metropolises.
Luca, what about electric cars? Do you see that in the future, and do you see that for everybody, not just for an elite like today?
No, I think so. I think will come. I mean, there are already cars in the market. I wouldn't say, apart from few exceptions, very successful, but it's a technology that has a potential simply because, I mean, I personally also drive an electric car. I have a prototype that at home, so and I like it. So I always come from the customer side, and you know, if I like something and I think it works, then I believe this thing will be successful. And it's very comfortable. It's very silent. I'm not so sure how much efficient this thing is, but also depending on what kind of electricity you're buying for this. Obviously, there are a lot of speculation about doing that with solar cells or, you know, with the wind, etc. But this is something will be possible, obviously, if there is the capacity to produce that kind of. Otherwise, the ecological balance is not then the right one. But the technology is there. I think in Europe there is a necessity probably to increase capacity of building batteries. And I think it will come. It will come. Right now, the big challenge is cost of the cost, especially of the batteries. But it's going, let's say, quickly down. And when the volume comes in, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. No? So if you do the volume, then you get the cost down. But you know, you don't get the volume because the products are relatively expensive. But I believe starting, I mean, especially in Europe, there are some milestones in terms of you know, achieving, let's say, CO2 and emission, let's say, targets. One is 2020, the other one is 2025. And I think those 2 milestones will accelerate the investment, as is happening, for example, in the Volkswagen Group, is accelerating a lot the investment. So I see, you know, the thing coming at a certain level at 2020, and then, you know, towards 2025, we will be able to see, I would say, relatively big mix. And it will be on the different level of the market. It will not be a premium car or an accessible car. It will be, I think, everywhere, because one of the things that we need, why we need the electric car, is actually to lower down the average consumption level of the fleet. So somehow the legislation is pushing down the thing. And yeah, I mean, there is also, I have to say, from a product point of view, I think one thing has to be clear. When you want people to jump on a new generation of product, you have to make sure that those products are better than the one they own. Because if they are not, then people will not jump, okay, at any price, right? They keep their current car, which is, in many cases, pretty good. And for me, having a car where you don't have compromise means you need to have a certain level of range, maybe on the 400 or 500 kilometers real. And you have to be able to actually charge this in a matter of a, you know, cappuccino stop at the autogrill, and for another 200 kilometers, and probably you need to have a difference in cost between the old and the new technology that is below the 10%. When those 2 or 3 conditions are there, then I see the thing moving, because the people will say, okay, you know, that's worth the change. Yeah. So there is a lot of engineering work that needs to be done to get there. Some of the competitors, you know, are more ahead of the game, others less, but everybody will come. It's my opinion.
You want to say something about this?
Oh, maybe just briefly, I think, you know, I totally agree. I want to add one point. I think, you know, one of the most exciting things today we've been talking about solar for a long time. But I think we're at the beginning of a big change in solar. And the reason is that prices have been going down so fast, and the reason is that, because of all of the silicon industry, prices are going down so fast that I was talking to one of the big utilities in the United States the other day, and they were just telling me the latest plant they were doing in Mexico, in a place where there's quite a lot of sun, but has a cost per megawatt hour that was $36 per megawatt hour. Now, when you get to the cost, sun, and lower, because prices are going lower and lower, then solar becomes, more competitive than anything else that we know today, than oil and so on. So I think that for me is the only hope, especially with the risk that we have after the US election about, what will happen in terms of climate change, fighting climate change at a global scale. I think the only hope is that at one point, very soon, already now in some places, we get solar as really the most competitive form of energy that we can produce. And then, at that point, naturally, then cars will need to change. Because then you need to take that energy and put it into cars. And so at that convergence, we could really see a big, big change. And what Tesla started doing about giving you the car for free, and then, giving you the car and then giving you basically charges for free, is part of this paradigm that could emerge where actually, when you get so cheap energy from sun, that then you can then have a very good mobility infrastructure in order to utilize it, and that has to be electric.
Which could be a good competitive advantage for SEAT, because of course here we have a lot of sun, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, a last one before we take the questions, and it is about something that today we call the connected car. What is this? Can you explain to us what is it that we call a connected car? It is something that we can see, there are prototypes, it's something that is working already. What is it? And the implications.
Carlo, you want to start? Or?
No, you start.
I start?
I don't know what it is.
You know what it is.
Luca
No,
starts.
I actually think that out of the three trends we were talking, let's say, about, probably this is the one for us that has potentially the, let's say, the highest marginal, let's say, additional profit opportunity, because it's about, moving the car, moving from the iPod to the iPhone. It's like putting an hardware into the context of a digital world, which we've never done. And I think this is also the reason why some giants like Apple or Google are coming in, because I think they realize that car will continue to be a big part of the Internet of Things, which is a good news, because 3-4 years ago, I get a lot of media asking me, and looking at me like old economy dinosaur and etc. And kind of predicting the end of the automobile. But in fact, this shows that the cars will still be very relevant for people, however they are in many years. And it's just about, let's say, the opportunity that we have for the first time to connect the car with the consumer, the car with infrastructure, the car with the retail, and all of them together. And obviously, I see a lot of transaction happening, potential transaction, and in transaction, there's always business. Now, the point is how much we take of it, who controls the game. How much money is in the different transactions, this I don't know. But I believe, personally, that this is, for us, probably one of the biggest opportunities. That's why we put in our technological roadmap the connected cars, the priority number one, compared to electric cars or autonomous driving.
In these moments, the show closes its doors. Thanks for your visit.
Thank you, bye.
Señores visitantes, en estos momentos el salón cierra sus puertas. Gracias por su visita.
Well, I'm asking...
Senyors visitants, en aquests moments el saló tanca les seves portes. Gràcies per la seva visita.
We have until tomorrow morning, no worries. So.
Can I finish this program as planned? I'm asking to the air.
Yes.
Well, very briefly, and we still have 8 minutes to take some questions from here.
Yes. Raise your hands. It would be great to hear from you. As we were saying, the future is what we build all together. It would be great to have feedback, comments. There's a question there.
Yes, please. You need to go to the microphone.
Yeah.
So we can hear what you're...
One over there, one over there.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
This works. All right. Thank you very much for your comments. I'm Pablo Valerio for Cities of the Future. I want to ask you about the social aspects of all these changes of mobility. Maybe I hope you can give me some ideas. There was a report in the US recently, one of many, that said that, for example, autonomous cars, mobilities will be a $120 billion business by 2025, basically replacing taxi drivers. And this is happening as well right now. Like a week ago, they were talking about self-driving trucks delivering goods. So this is going to change not only the way people move, but actually how many professions will change. Do you have any comments on that matter? And I'm just thinking about the elections in the US last week. This is going to put a pushing back these kind of technologies.
Well, there are a lot of questions.
Okay,
Start with
so
the last
first of all,
one, as you
I
are
will not comment anymore on the elections. I had a very bad experience 2 days ago. I made a bad comment about Trump, and then at the end, you know, some Trump supporters in Europe came to me and harassed me. So I think, you know, there's, especially after the election, they're becoming more and more vocal, so I'm sure there's some of them hidden in the audience here. So no comments about the elections. But what I will say is about how this could impact humans. I would say two things. The first one is, yes, a lot of jobs are going to disappear. You know, if you think about, we had taxi drivers, they felt threatened by Uber drivers. I think now Uber drivers should feel threatened because, you know, those cars are going to drive themselves. And there's a few million drivers around the world. Those jobs are going to disappear. Now, is it a bad thing? I think overall is a good thing. If you can have, if you can replace a boring task, give it to a machines and do something else, it's a good thing. It's the same thing with robots, right? I think Volkswagen, where Luca was till last year, announced 2 years ago that basically they would not replace people retiring anymore with people, but with robots. I think, again, it's very good. I think if you don't have somebody who has to turn a bolt all their lives, I don't think that's living. You know, that's what most people, unfortunately, did in the 20th century. If a robot can do that, it's good for society. But there's two very big important caveats. The first one is how we're going to redistribute the gain. So it's good overall, but then can we make sure that everybody's benefiting from that? And for that, I would say something, you know, I have a proposal, and the proposal is actually that also robots or self-driving cars should pay taxes. And you say, should pay taxes, what you mean is that also capital and basically also automation should generate value that then is distributed in society. So basically, what you do there is not going to reward only capital, but it's going to reward everybody in society. And the second thing that's very important is that, yes, we might get, in 10 years, into a much better society, but the question is, how do we get there? And if in the process of going there, we got people who did for half of their lives something, and that type of job evaporates, well, we need to make sure we take care of them. And we need to then think about training, about retraining people. We need to think about doing an education, doing university, to start thinking about from the beginning about what will be the professions we'll have, not today, but in 10, 20, 30 years. So I think somehow we need to manage what is going to happen in the meanwhile. So those two things are crucial, is, you know, even if it's a better society at the end, in the end, then first of all, can we make sure that the gains are spread in an equitable way? And second, how do we get there? Can we make sure we manage the transition?
I'm not going to answer. Maybe I take the second question.
Okay, is there any other question from the room? Please raise your hand.
Yeah, there's one hand there. Just feel free to.
Yes, please.
There's one here.
Good evening. Thank you, first of all, for the very interesting dialogue. My name is Sean. I'm a master's student here in Barcelona at the BSM. We talked a lot about self-driving autonomous cars tonight, and I think SEAT is also presenting the smart shuttle, it's called. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Uber is heavily investing in self-driving cars. They have the pilot fleet in Pittsburgh, and they also did the first self-driving Budweiser transportation in America as well. And at the same time, they launched a new concept. It's a 100-page white paper. I don't know if you've heard about it. Uber Elevate. And what they're planning to do is they want to construct autonomous drones that will take over transportation. So instead of taxis or self-driving cars, we would fly from point A to point B. Do you think that in 20, 30 years we will have a mix of transportation services in cities, or will it only be one major transportation service ruling? And maybe then, Luca, it's good that you answer the question, how do you see the role of the automotive industry with these new kind of revolutionary transportation services?
Oh, no, it's yours.
It's yours, yes?
It's all mine.
It's all yours.
Very good.
Please go.
So I mean, you know, it's difficult to predict what will be the mix. No, I think she was referring before at the beginning about cities becoming, you know, 3 times more congested. You know, of what? I don't know. I mean, I remember seeing in some of the automotive museum, even in the you know, picture from the 50s or the 60s talking about flying cars. So I haven't seen one, you know, after 50 years. Maybe drone technology will help for something. I obviously focus on, you know, on the 4 wheels driving. I think that the car has still potential to transform itself and integrate itself, taking into account also this potential of the technology and the people needs. So I believe that personally that there will be maybe more specialized cars. So there will be, let's say, more focus. Right now we do cars for target groups, okay? For example, you know, people with lower budget, higher budget, with certain demographic, you know it very well from your experience with advertising. I think that probably will be more, let's say, more focused on usage that, and function that those vehicles will have to do. For example, there was before mentioning about trucks. I think one of the, let's say, early signals that we will see when it comes to evaluating the potential of autonomous driving vehicles, we will probably be seeing that into robotaxi experience. That means, you know, vehicles that move from A to B in some kind of controlled environment, some cities, where people jump in and out like in the Luna Park, and you know. And this is, if this works and people get used to it, you will be able to see a sign. The other thing for me is trucks. You know why? Because there is a clear business case behind it. I mean, right now, it's for, you know, when you go back home to work, then you have to, you know, to fight the, let's say, or to engage with the finance guy that will ask you a business case for everything. For the autonomous driving car, the only thing we see today is the fact that you will be able to surcharge a price for the features you put on that car. You put an A8 and then you overload the car with sensors and radars and the customer will pay. That's the business model, okay? But beyond that, it's difficult to understand, you know, what is the value you can bring to the consumer, to, you know, to what extent, etc. On the truck business, for example, we know very well that autonomous driving is kind of swarm intelligence things, or platooning functions on the thing, bring maybe 10–15% of, let's say, lower consumption. They bring, you know, they increase safety by X% because drivers that are 8 hours on the thing will make a lot less. The business case is very evident. I mean, I know that from the conversation we had with our colleagues in the group of MAN or Scania. They are pretty advanced in the thing, and I think the early, you know, signs of the potential you will see in that sector, because there is a very clear business case.
Yeah, totally. Maybe I'll add a couple of things about it. The beginning of your question was also about, you know, how can you have all the different mix? And I think the interesting thing, what Luca was saying about the connected car, means that many other things are going to be connected. You can have connected bikes. You know, we're working on a project, or Nissan, a product called Copenhagen Wheel. It's connected bike. You can think about connected different types of transportation. And then when everything is connected, then you can jump from one to the other in a much easier way. You can get off a train, and you can take a city bike because, you know, it's there, and you can take a car to go, and you can take something else in a way we couldn't just a few years ago. So certainly that will multiply the ability to take different modes of transportation, so it will make not only the car, but many of them much more competitive. At the same time, I tell you, there's 2 pieces of bullshit out there that keep on surfacing. I'm saying this even with a lot of respect for Uber. We just started a big collaboration. We launched it 2 weeks ago in our group at MIT and Uber on mobility. Looking forward, we're doing a lot of research on sharing mobility with self-driving cars. But there's 2 pieces of collaboration, of bullshit. The first one is about drones. And that's not because of technology, it's just because of physics. Now, if you take a drone, most of you have used a drone, the drone is probably like, the weight of the drone is probably 1 kilo, and you see how much noise and how much air you need to move and keep that up in the sky. And that's just because of physics. And that's the reason why helicopters exist today. They're a bit expensive, but you're taking a helicopter, it's such a mess, the amount of noise and air movement and so on that it generates. Now, in some places, in some cities such as the city, I think, with the largest number of helicopters is Sao Paulo. When you go concentration of helicopters, you have just a few dozen, so not many. You know, and when they concentrate, is a mess. You cannot live underneath because so much air movement and noise. Now think, if you had in Barcelona to have the number of helicopters or drones same as the number of cars, and you had 100,000, that would be total nightmare. So forget about drones. They will be useful in some conditions, maybe in Africa, but drones, not like helicopter drones, not quadcopters, but drones more like, autonomous aircrafts. They could work. There's a few niche examples, but in general, I think, they are totally, this old dream that will not materialize as people imagine just because of physics. And the second thing that's bullshit, but we can talk about it another time, I think, is Hyperloop. And the reason is that Hyperloop is basically reinventing the same experience that you have with an airplane. And while I think what you want to do is go point to point from the center of the city to the center of another city, maybe with a high-speed train, but not to go to a transfer station outside the city, like an airport, and then wait for this dark capsule that moves into a dark tube fast, like an airplane, and then get to another transfer point. So basically, it's reinventing, in terms of experience, it's doing nothing else than reinventing the airplane. While I think the exciting thing of tomorrow is how we can go in a nicer way from A to B and keep on working and looking at the landscape when we do that. So I think that's the other thing that's clearly, to me, overrated today. But again, it's one of these dreams that come and then it's a bit of vaporware. At one point, it will disappear.
Well, the time is over. I have the very last question for each of you. Carlo, Wikipedia says you are an activist. In which way you are an activist?
Well, first of all, you should ask Wikipedia, not me. But I don't know. But I think what we've been doing today, probably is also part of activism, about how we can ask questions and how we can fight for some of the things we care about.
Luca, you wrote a full book about the things that matter to you because you wanted to share them with other executives. Tell us what really matters to you and share it with us today.
What really matters for me?
Yes.
I like what I do.
Well, I think it's a great way to close in this. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you for coming.
Grazie.